Hey, just a heads up before we start the show. This episode does have mentions of child abuse and sexual assault. We also talk about avocados, but just wanted to let you know that those things are discussed. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Wow If True, the podcast of your wildest memes.
We talk about niche internet fame, interview people who are making it on the internet, and chart our own misguided quest for online attention. I'm your guy who forgot to put anything funny here. Sorry, it's been a week, Isabel.
That's pretty disappointing, but I'm Amanda. Anyone could be famous on the internet, so why not us? So we're back to our roots here talking about what it's like to go viral with people that have more clout than us. So we have Elizabeth Hunter here today, who does definitively have more clout than us. Elizabeth has over 100,000 followers on TikTok at @thatlizhunter, and I think we will let Elizabeth introduce herself, who she is, why she is on social media, and doing the things, but first, we have a very important question to start off with, which is, Elizabeth, why do you cut through the pit of your avocado?
I honestly had no idea that I was cutting avocados wrong.
Wait, sorry. Did you just think that was normal? You thought that was like the regular way?
I never noticed.
For context, so Elizabeth tweeted, "I'm gonna get canceled on Instagram because of an avocado," and I was like, that's interesting. So I went and I looked at Elizabeth's Instagram story, and she posted like making breakfast, and there was an avocado, and just the pit was sliced through, and I was like, Elizabeth, why'd you do that? So now I'm asking you, why did you slice through the avocado pit?
Well, apparently I started making avocados like with breakfast, like avocado toast, at the same time that I got this really fancy knife set. So I've never struggled to like cut an avocado right through the seed. So I just like have always cut my avocados straight in half and spoon the seeds out, like the seed on either side.
Oh my god.
I didn't know that was weird until I did it this morning, and then I immediately was like, I'm about to go study for the LSAT. Does anybody want to like give me questions on my Instagram story so that when I'm done studying for 3 hours, I'll have something fun to do? Well, it wasn't fun because I came back and there was like over a dozen people who were like, how are you cutting an avocado like that? And I didn't know it was controversial.
Okay, the surprising thing here is that it was only a dozen people, because sincerely, what the fuck?
Honestly, it's probably more at this point, but yes.
Well, you heard it here first. Elizabeth just has really good knives and prefers to scoop two things instead of just cutting around it and scooping one thing out.
2 questions. First of all, what brand of knife is this?
The one that was cheapest on Amazon.
What the fuck?
It's a blue Cuisinart. I know this because I looked at the story and I looked at it in awe and thought, you cut through the avocado seed.
Second question. Are you going to keep cutting avocados like this?
I have no reason to change. It's worked for me.
Okay, that's all I've got.
The struggle of finding the seed to cut around it, like, I don't think I'm that talented.
It's right there. It's not that... It is right there. I cannot emphasize to you enough how much it is, like, right in the center. It's, like, of seeds that are hard to find in fruit, I feel like that's one of the easy ones, just based on size and, like, location.
I feel like if I adjusted my knife cutting to skip the seed, I would lose a finger. Like, that is what's going to happen.
Can I make a really, really, really bad segue?
As bad as my avocado skills.
Yes. Elizabeth isn't willing to change who she is because people told her that she cuts avocados wrong. And I think this segues into the fact that Elizabeth won't change who she is because of what the cult she grew up in told her about herself and her sexuality and other things. So, Elizabeth, who are you? What do you do on TikTok? What's your story?
That really was a bad segue.
Apparently Amanda has hit the nail on the head. I'm notoriously stubborn.
Sometimes about really important things, and sometimes about avocados.
Obviously, avocados are part of the important things. Like, let's not get it twisted.
Yeah, you know, like sexuality, loving yourself for who you are, cutting avocados.
Very all-important, all life-changing, apparently. All controversial on the internet. So I went viral on TikTok in February because I was talking to my therapist and I told her a funny thing that my mom had said. And my therapist said, I want a podcast with funny stories from your mom. And I thought that's too much work. So I'm just going to do a story on TikTok instead. And that TikTok, I just was like, my mom who raised me in a cult said blah, blah, blah. And people said, hold on, the cult. And so I started talking about the cult, and I ended up in The Sun, in UK tabloids, and all over. And also I sued the Department of Education at this, like, a month later, so it was not related, but it was related.
That's extremely girl boss.
But I went from, like, UK tabloids to the Washington Post and Teen Vogue, which is a nice, like, shift in media if you're gonna, like, end up in publications on the internet. And so that's where I am today. I just keep trekking along on the internet, somehow stumbling into niche notoriety about cult life.
So, like, I guess, like, a follow-up question to that is kind of like, you didn't intend to end up on Cult Talk, right?
No, I had already, like, made it clear that I wanted to be Marie Antoinette Thirst TikTok. So, like, the week before I started talking about my cults TikTok, someone was like, what's a historical fact that, like, irks you? And my historical fact that irks me is that Marie Antoinette did not say let them eat cake. And that was my first viral TikTok, that I was, like, mad about Marie Antoinette slander. And that hit, like, 20K views. And that was like, oh, I made one funny Marie Antoinette TikTok, so I'm gonna make some more funny TikToks. And if I could just, you know, stay in the Marie Antoinette lane, I would love to, but I don't live in Versailles, so.
This is such a weird internet issue to have, where it's like, oh, I wanted to make Marie Antoinette Thirst TikToks, but actually I ended up going viral for cult things. Like, when you say it like that, that's objectively insane.
I suppose, but nothing about my life, like, tracks with the, like, normal vein or the zeitgeist. It just, like, does its own thing.
Truly just girl bossing it day by day.
Exactly.
We like to overuse the word girl boss here.
It really is our new thing on this podcast, is saying girl boss, like, constantly. It's actually kind of a problem.
Yeah, Isabel and I, we went to the Ren Fair together last week, and the entire time, which also Isabel got a cloak at the Ren Fair. I just wanted to say that on the podcast for posterity, but we just kept saying girl boss the whole time, and it was like, damn, can't believe that we have a podcast together and we're even more annoying when we're not podcasting together.
Truly, art does imitate life.
Yeah, well, I guess, like, also, it's not as though you exclusively post cult talk content. Like, you post a lot about books that you're reading and queer history and stuff like that. So within cult TikTok in particular, I feel like that's just, like, really interesting to me in that, like, I don't know if, like, have you met other people that grew up in cults, like, not on the internet? Or, like, would you say that the internet gives you a way to, like, interact with people that have these, like, similar experiences in a way that real life doesn't?
Most of the people, well, let's say I went to a school that had a lot of people who grew up in very similar backgrounds. You know, I went to a college that is notoriously fundamental. I've never called my alma mater a cult because it was so different from my childhood, and I did feel like I had a lot of freedom of, like, expression until I became, like, started coming out as gay, and then they were like, actually, no, you're not allowed to do that publicly. But a lot of the people I grew up with who grew up in similar backgrounds to me went to, like, fundamentalist schools, and most of them didn't, like, leave Christianity or even, like, say that they grew up in a cult. So in the people I knew who grew up around me, like, have very rarely, like, renounced it as bad. Only a few of my, like, friends have, and none of them have moved on with me. Like, most of my friends who've renounced it bad have stayed in Texas, and I live in South Carolina. So there isn't that, like, we get together, like, when I would come home from spring break or whatever, and we would have, like, coffee and, like, roll our eyes at things that happened. But we never, like, talked outside about it much. We just kind of all agreed that our life was rough, and we moved on from it. Once I started talking on the internet, however, I ran into so many people who survived IBLP/IBLP, the cult that I grew up in, who were in different veins of it, in totally different experiences, but, like, the same kind of trauma and religious ideas that led the cult, who are in all parts of the country. So that's been really helpful because I felt very isolated for a long while, that I was the only ATI person at my college. And everybody said you were in a cult, but nobody recognized the reasons ATI was a cult also exist in other organizations that bleed into American Christianity and are very harmful for a lot of us.
I feel like this is the one time that, like, the algorithm online has worked in someone's favor.
Yes. I really think it has for a lot of us fundy kids who grew up, like, extremely isolated. The reason I realized I was gay is I, like, ran into other fundies who, like, had moved on from fundamentalism, and I wasn't ready to, like, not be a Christian publicly. Like, I was still like, I'm a Jesus person, but I don't agree with, like, the Donald Trump aspect of the church anymore, because this is, like, 2016 when I start, like, investing in what we call the ex-evangelical community on Twitter. And I kind of went viral in several tweets and started talking to people about my fundamentalist background. Oh, and there was a viral interview that I had on this like atheist website. It was called Not Your Mission Field, and it was just like stories of people who'd grown up in fundamentalism, and some like me still considered themselves Christians, some did not, and that interview kind of went viral. And I think like 3 months after that interview is when I almost got kicked out of college. So then I had to like completely disengage from that community for my own safety. So I kind of had this incredible evangelical community on Twitter for about 9 months, and then I had to completely cut myself off, and I feel like I've refound it via TikTok, which has been really healing because I will never be able to like be as open on Twitter and feel completely safe because of what I experienced in college and almost getting kicked out for my tweets.
This is one of the really beautiful things about social media, is that like you can find people that maybe have like gone through similar things as you. Just as another example, like I know someone who had COVID and has like long hauler symptoms, and there's like long hauler COVID groups, and it's like in her normal life she doesn't know other people that are going through that, and it's like the internet lets people come together. Isn't that great?
You know what's cool about that I feel like people don't talk about as much is that like it'll be somebody who doesn't realize that their experience is something that other people share. And because of the way the internet works and the fact that I hate to say like TikTok's algorithm is good sometimes, but like not to anthropomorphize like the way the internet works, but it will like draw people who have similar experiences who don't know that they have experiences that are common together. And that's actually a really cool thing when it's like a good thing happening, maybe less good when it's like, you know, radicalization. Not to be like the internet has downsides, but
I mean, I think it's like in the same way that like people curate their news feeds and their timelines and whatever, and like I know that in some ways, as much as social media can be bad when I have like body image issues and you see other people and you're like, oh, I wish I looked like that. Like I've kind of tried to one up the algorithm by like purposely following like fat activists and like plus size models who are like, look, I have a body that looks like a normal human being. Isn't that cool? And like the algorithm can be bad, but the algorithm can also be good.
We've had like a lot of episodes that have been like the algorithm is very bad. So I'm kind of glad we're doing an episode today about like the algorithm is good sometimes. Maybe
it's not the algorithm so much as it is like knowing how to use social media to find communities that you specifically want to be a part of.
I actually, before I started talking about former Fundy stuff, I didn't really see that many TikTokers making content about it. I know there were a few. I know there's a few atheists, like fundies who become atheists, but my niche is not atheism. Like I'm not out here debating philosophy or anything. I'm just storytelling, like sharing my story. And it was really funny because I went viral in February, started talking more, and I personally did not start seeing other people share fundy childhood stories till like May over into the summer. And I know a couple of them I like commented and I'm like, oh wow, so relatable. And they would reply to me, oh yeah, I saw you and it inspired me. And like I would realize that they were following me, so I would be like, oh, I follow them back. I'm not gonna say I was like the first one or anything, because I definitely know there were people who were in ATI and who shared stories about surviving ATI. But I think that like storytelling has definitely blown up on TikTok in a way, and just like a lot of people were talking about like Bill Gothard and like let's tell stories about the leaders of these cults and not our own personal experiences as much. And I think that is more relatable. Is like everybody knows Bill was bad, but like how did it impact our day-to-day life as kids?
Yeah, and I think even before doing this interview, I like looked through your TikToks again just to kind of like refresh my memory of the Elizabeth Extended Universe.
The EEU, if you will.
Yes. And I think there was one TikTok where you said something like, I'm talking about these stories because I hope that it helps other people know that they weren't the only one who experienced a toxic religious upbringing. And I think that kind of like stuck out to me because I feel like people might ask, why are you telling these like very personal stories on social media when we're kind of taught to like not be open in that way? But I think it is a really good point and something that's like illustrated in people responding to into your TikToks by sharing their own stories that, like, it really does make people feel less alone just to hear, like, here's a story about something that happened in church one time that, looking back, I can see as particularly strange or interesting or indicative of something greater.
I definitely think there is like power in, like, a lot of healing can come from naming your trauma, and a lot of us have been like, sometimes you don't even realize something is traumatic or that something was abnormal until you like tell the story. And then I definitely know from experience, like, until TikTok, I would like, it was kind of like the feature at a party that if I got invited to, somehow my childhood trauma would get brought up as like the party favor. Like telling funky stories, like it just always happened. Like I would say like a random thing that would have happened. Well, and I tell this story like when my sisters and I got like tied together via a rope. And I told that story in therapy and thought it was like a funny story until my therapist was like, wait, what? And that happened a lot to me just at like parties and like friends' social events. And I think on TikTok, being able to like share those stories and knowing as I speak them that like this is not normal, I feel like that is healing for both me and the people who were like, oh yeah, something similar like happened to me, or my parents had like a similar like philosophy. And like when I bring it up to my parents today, they always are like, oh, did we do that? Like somehow they conveniently forget. For years, I've like brought up stuff to my mom like way before TikTok, and my mom will say, oh, we were just doing our best. And I would just be like, nod and walk away, because I was like, well, I don't know how to respond. Like you're saying you didn't know what to do, so you're doing your best. So I would just walk away and just like swallow down my frustration. And I feel like a lot of that I'm able to work through without like constantly wanting to confront my parents on TikTok, which is much better for me emotionally to just like tell and engage on the internet than like trying to make my parents understand what they did was wrong. Like I'm never gonna do that. So like the internet is a much more healing way and it is more fruitful than trying to convince my parents that what they did was wrong.
Right, because you can like control what you're saying. You can't really control how your parents are gonna like react at all.
People ask me all the time on the internet if I have a relationship with them, and I always evade that question because I don't think people realize the nuances of a relationship like that, and like what my experience is with a person who was abusive versus like what my siblings' experience is totally different. So how we engage with both our trauma and like in real life in those relationships is going to be different even than how we share that trauma on the internet.
We love the buzzword of parasocial relationships, where, like, because you're sharing personal stories, like, maybe people are developing a parasocial relationship with you, and then they feel like it's okay to ask a really personal question, like, tell me about your relationship with your parents. But then, like, it seems like you do have clear boundaries of what you're ready and willing to share on social media versus, like, what you want to keep to yourself because you're a human being who has feelings in a real life.
Yeah, and it's really nice because my parents are so isolated from the internet and pop culture. The only pop culture they know about is stuff like I tell them. So I told them about noodles. It was like a no bones day, and I was talking to my mom, and I was like, so you wouldn't know about this, but there's this dog, and I explained it, and my mom goes, oh, that sounds entertaining. And she really didn't, I don't think ever understood like what it meant when I said like 5 million people know about this. Like that totally goes over her head. And when it comes to my own social media, like I was talking to my mom, I think they know TikTok is a word. They know Instagram is a thing, but like they've never engaged with it. And I said something about like YouTubers don't get monetized until they hit 1,000 followers or subscribers, and you have to get 4,000 watch hours. And I was like at 990. I'm past 1K on YouTube at this point, but I'm not at 4K watch hours.
Everybody watch Elizabeth's YouTube for 4,000 hours. Go. Do it. But after you listen to the podcast.
Yes, let's do the podcast first. So I was like explaining that to my mom, and my mom said, well, what are you? And I was like, well, I'm in the 900s range. And my mom goes, what are you doing that 900 people are interested in your life? And it's like, there's no, like, they do not understand social media. And it sometimes does feel weird that I'm literally telling these stories about their life that involve me. It's my life, but they are heavily featured in it, and they will never really understand what that means because they're not active online. And that's kind of like my actions are completely anonymous to them, if that makes sense. So that helps because I can like separate it, and also like I don't think it's of it as malicious at all. They are neither harmed nor benefited by what I say online about our childhood.
So the chances of your parents listening to this podcast, slim to none is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I tried to explain podcast to them like 6 months ago because I was trying to send them a Matthew McConaughey, Hank the Cowdog podcast because we grew up reading Hank the Cowdogs and I want them to vote for Matthew McConaughey over Greg Abbott. So I was like trying to help out by sending them that, and I don't think they ever listened to it because I don't think they understand how to use Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Have you had instances of other people from growing up find your social media, or what would you do if that happens / had happened?
Oh, it happens all the time. When people first started finding it, it was like a few random people from my past. And at first it was like, oh, this is kind of weird. But then it just became strange because it was people who grew up with us and like saw the actual like child abuse happening. And sometimes they were adults and they didn't do anything. And so that makes me feel like they're going to reach out now, or they follow me on Instagram. And I really don't know like what the point is. Like, I understand you feel bad that, like, you didn't say anything and, like, my parents were actively hurting us. But also, why are you following me now? Like, I would rather you just, like, never walk back into my life. Like, that would be great if you don't. It's very weird when people follow me but don't reach out, if that makes sense. It's better when they reach out and they were like, oh, yeah, it was definitely a cult. Like, I'm so glad you're talking about it, which happened to me a few times, but it's mostly people my age who grew up with me. It's weird when people who are, like, a decade older than me don't message, don't reply to my stories, but just quietly follow me. And I'm like, why are you here?
Do you block them or anything, or do you just kind of let this stand as it is?
I do not block them. I have an uncle who doesn't watch my TikTok but messages me short sermons every day. So he'll message me like 5 Bible verses and then his like,
oh, that's a lot,
a couple paragraphs on like what he thinks the Bible is telling him to tell me. I just ignore those messages. I have a lot of interesting people from my past who love to like reach out and like tell me things, and I just like, okay, and read them and leave them on read. So I leave a lot of people on read. I'm not very aggressive with blocking. I could be much better probably for my mental health, but it takes a lot of emotional strength for me to block someone. Like, I have to really decide that they're unreachable and like completely fallible in a way, and that's really difficult for me to say that someone is like past the point of redemption.
Aside from people that you might have known in real life, do you have techniques or rules in place for yourself about how to navigate trolling or people that are just like clearly acting in bad faith, and like how do you manage that for yourself?
I don't really get a lot of trolls. I think it's because I'm like so emotionally honest, especially on TikTok. It's kind of hard to troll someone who is like, my mom duct taped my mouth closed. I don't really know what a troll would do about that. I do get trolls like when I share LGBTQ content, and I just like ignore them mostly. I don't really delete comments because like that's deleting engagement. And also other people respond and they roast them. So I don't really respond to people who are arguing in bad faith. I let other people respond because I find that my followers who want to respond typically are more funny than me. I've been in a very like safe place in the internet. Like, most people go to bat for me because either people knew me growing up and they're willing to be like, no, Elizabeth is telling the truth. Like, we saw Liz, like, this happen. And also, like, it's pretty clear that I'm not embellishing stories. Like, there's no reason to think I am. I think the most things I get trolled for are my teeth. People tell me all the time to go get braces. Almost always post a comment on my stories and ask for money, and nobody has offered to pay for my teeth yet. So that's my favorite comment, because I just remind people to give me money if they want to fix my teeth.
And eventually someone will give you enough money for that, so this is a win for you.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't say I was going to use it for my teeth.
No, they'll just give you money, and then you can, like, it's free money, yeah. Hello and welcome to the ad break. This is the part of the podcast where I tell you how you can support us, because don't you just love supporting your favorite internet culture experts? Anyway, let's get started. First, light some candles. Second, draw a pentagram. Actually, oh, just kidding, that's the other ad I need to read. Actually, here's what you're going to start with. First, pick up your phone. I know it's next to you. I know it's next to your computer. I know it's in your pocket, maybe next to you on the pillow, sitting next to you somehow, in your hand. I live like this. You probably live like this. Come on, pick it up. Great. Now, open your favorite messaging app of choice. I don't care who the last message chain you have was with. Your mom, your boss, your best friend, your mortal enemy. Anyway, open it up. And now you're going to type, hey, I think there's this podcast you're really going to like. It's called Wow If True, and it's a deep dive into internet culture, and I am definitely not being held hostage into writing this. You've done all that? Great. Hit send. Thank you so much. This is actually going to, if everybody does this, this will boost our listenership by 100%. I think that's how math works. Anyway, second task for you. You're doing great. You're doing so good. Second task. Now, you're gonna go on over to Patreon at patreon.com/wowiftrue. And this part's optional because it does cost you a few dollars. It costs you an amount of money that you want to give us, your favorite podcast hosts. We are begging you. Just kidding, we're not begging you, but this does keep the lights on. And if you want access to our very cool, very lit, very pog, and not cringe at all Discord, you're going to want to click on your favorite monetary tier here because there's a lot of stuff you could get depending on at what level you want to support us. But honestly, this is an ad for the Discord. The Discord is where it's at. You can get the Discord at any level, and your support really helps us keep the digital lights on and the data flowing. So these are the two things I've asked for you to do. This ad is the one thing Amanda asked me to do. And as always, thank you for listening. Has going viral affected your IRL life a lot, or how has it affected that?
I did start dating Zoe because I went viral.
Okay, so it has, yeah.
The reason why we know Elizabeth is that, speaking of which, so one of our Patreon patrons, who also happens to be my best friend, but one of our Patreon patrons...
Wow, I'm not your best friend? Wow.
I have multiple best friends. So one of our Patreon patrons at the level IRL BFF, who is also a legit IRL BFF, Zoe Stoller, is also a social media personality, and I know Elizabeth because Zoe and Elizabeth met and started dating through the internet, which, why go on Tinder when you can go viral?
Exactly. And Tinder was honestly useless compared to going viral. So I had hit Zoe up back in December. A friend told me, you and Zoe should date. So I DM'd Zoe. And this is at the point I had 600 followers on Instagram and 0 followers on TikTok. So I DM'd Zoe and I was like, oh, so-and-so says that we should date. And Zoe just went, that's funny.
That's just K.
And then I hit 1K followers on Instagram in January. I was feeling pretty myself. I hit 1K. I bought Zoe's merch and I was taking cute pictures in their merch. Still nothing.
That's how you slide into someone's DMs.
I was trying. And then I went viral on TikTok, and then Zoe started DMing me on TikTok. But at that point I had turned off all my notifications on TikTok because I was getting too many. So after missing messages because I didn't check the app more than 3 times a day for my own sanity's sake, I DM'd Zoe. I was like, well, here's my number if you want to text me. And here we are, 8 months later, so.
Truly a modern love story.
Send that to the fucking New York Times.
I know couples that have met on Tumblr. It's not that weird, honestly.
Is a TikTok couple better or worse than a Discord couple? I know a lot of people who met on other social media, ended up in the same Discord servers, and then started dating, and it's been years. I know people who got married because of this.
But aside from dating life, I will say that going viral on TikTok coincided with me filing a lawsuit against the Department of Ed, and they named a lawsuit after me, and there's 40 plaintiffs on the case, and I still to this day don't know if they named it after me because I went viral and they were yeah, let's use the clout, or because they were well, I do know it's because I went to Bob Jones and they wanted to name Bob Jones as the sample case, and Bob Jones historically doesn't do well before the Supreme Court when they're being discriminatory. So they were let's use the Bob Jones grad in the group. But I did go viral, and then the head lawyer realized I went viral, and then the same day he realized it, he was do you want to be the named plaintiff? And I'm not gonna say me going viral made me a named plaintiff, but it helped.
Tell us more about your lawsuit and how that came about and what it's all about.
Yeah, so if I hadn't grown up in a cult, I would probably not be suing the Department of Ed. So it's all related, it all goes back. So I went to Bob Jones University, which lost a lawsuit in the 1980s because they banned interracial dating, and the IRS sued them. They lost their tax exempt status. It was a whole thing. They were we're never gonna allow interracial dating because we believe it's biblical. And then in 2001 they were actually not. we're gonna go back on that. It's not biblical. And I went to Bob Jones in 2015. It was one of the only schools. I had like a list of schools that my parents were like, if you go to these schools, we won't disown you. But if you go to like Baylor, Texas A&M, we're gonna disown you. Baylor, because my dad has something against them. He's like anti-Baylor because of some drama from the 1960s. And he wasn't a fan of Liberty because when he visited Liberty in the 1970s, they told him he would have to shave his beard for him to be a student. So he was like, please don't go to Liberty because me and Jerry Falwell have beef from the 1970s. So there was not that many schools that were an option. And I was like the type A student at Bob Jones. I was like the best student possible because I thrived in college. I bought my first pair of jeans, I cut my hair, I started really discovering who I was in school, and I have ADHD and I was homeschooled, so I don't know how to study, but I still got A's on most everything, just because I'm like a really good test taker. So I did really well. I was heavily involved in societies, which is Christian lingo for sororities. I was in Theta Mu Theta. We were the bandits. I was great. I was a community service rep. It was a great time. And then my senior year, I was the head of our campus TV studio. So I was like our TV studio director. And when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I had worked on Marco Rubio's campaign. So I was the Republican of Republicans on campus. I'd been a delegate to every Republican convention since I turned 18, and I'm 21 at the time. I had been a junior delegate when I was 16, so I was like a Republican. But because Trump became the Republican Party and my values as a human just did not align with that. And I went to the Republican convention in 2016, and I was like in Texas, the state convention. And the anti-immigration lingo really, really bothered me as like a regular human. And I was like, if this is the Republican Party, then I'm not Republican. And I said that kind of like sarcastically, but also like, y'all need to get your act together. But by 2018, to me, it was really, really clear that I was no longer a Republican. Literally, I've been going to Republican conventions since I was adopted when I was 9 years old. And the change in the rhetoric that I had heard every year since I was 9 was so drastic that it really, I was like, this is not what I was raised to be, which was really weird because my parents were in a cult and it wasn't as extreme as Trump Republicanism. So there's something weird about that. So I go back to Bob Jones. I'm like trying to find my place in the world, and that is not a Republican anymore. So I'm like trying to figure out what I am. So around the same time, I start listening to a lot of Christian podcasts by people who are calling out Trump Republicanism in a lot of ways. Kevin Garcia was the main one in A Tiny Revolution, and they were openly gay, and I never heard an openly gay person before who also said they were a Christian. So I'm listening to his podcast. I'm also reading Love, Simon for the first time, the Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. And I had a book blog at this time, and to tell you like how fundamentalist I was, in 2014 when I started that blog, I literally had blog posts like, why we need the Defense of Marriage Act.
Oof.
And then in 2018, I'm like writing book reviews for like, I'm gonna go see Love, Simon in theater. So like that was like a huge like transition. And as I'm like being like, I am an ally, I also was like, maybe I'm not just an ally. And so by spring 2018, I realized that I was gay. I said I was bisexual and started like, I think I downloaded Tinder for the first time. I had like my gay Haley Hioka playlist. Like I was like really into like discovering who I was. And I started my senior year and I was like, I can just be closeted my whole year. Like that's not gonna be a problem. Like to me, I was like, I can do this. Like I can really do everything I'm supposed to, like check off the list of behaviors that are accepted at Bob Jones and also know that I'm queer. Like I'm not gonna let my queer identity affect my student status. Like that's not something I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna like break the rules and have sex or like carry around a rainbow flag. I'm just gonna like exist as a queer person who knows I'm queer but doesn't like publicly make it a deal. And I thought that was totally fine. I really like the rule book doesn't say that you can't be queer. It just says you can't like have sex outside of marriage. So I was like, this is great. But I was on Twitter a lot at the time and I like tweeted Happy Pride. The tweet that really made people mad was I said that evangelicalism was a garbage can that needed to be set on fire and left at the curb and just some stuff like that. I was just like mad, and it was also at the same time as the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. So I was dealing with a lot of overt sexism on campus. A fellow student had told me in trigger warning for sexual assault, but this male student had said to me in a class, the only reason a victim of sexual assault comes forward after the statute of limitations has expired is because she wants attention. And as a survivor of sexual assault, and knowing that I ever came forward, it would be past the statute of limitations, I was infuriated. And I was very upset that the professor, who was a woman, just kind of like ignored his statement and was like, okay, let's start class. And I was like, there should be like more pushback against this like sexism and harmful rhetoric that is so prevalent on this campus, because it was everywhere at Bob Jones. So I was saying that on Twitter. I was like, why aren't professors standing up for victims of sexual assault? Why aren't people like going to bat for those who are the most at risk of these kind of harmful ideologies and behaviors? And at the same time, I like met Becky Albertalli. So I have pictures with Becky Albertalli. I'm like, I'm having a fun time in regular life and just sharing that on Twitter.
Simply vibing.
I like never came out on Twitter. Like on National Coming Out Day, I was like, to everyone in the closet, you are loved and I love you for who you are. Like that was the most vague ally sounding thing I could think of to say without like outing myself. Like I was not outing myself on Twitter. But some alumni found my Twitter and got pretty upset because they were like, how does this girl represent Bob Jones? Because she is in charge of the TV department. So Friday after the 2018 midterms, I remember everything in my life based on elections. I got called into a 3.5-hour meeting with campus authorities. I lost my job at the TV station. I was charged $100 and I was threatened with expulsion. And then I was repeatedly asked if I was a homosexual. I had to go to required counseling. It ruined my senior year. It was like one of the worst moments of my life. I had no recourse because like this was my college. Like there was nothing I could do about it. They sat me down and they pulled out a manila envelope. It was like 2 inches thick. It had all my tweets like printed and then like highlighted everything they thought was like controversial. The first tweet they like pulled off the stack was the one where I was like, why doesn't a professor stand up for victims of sexual assault? And they were like, are you publicly condemning our professors? And I was like, what? And then the one with the evangelicalism is a trash can. And because I said it needs to be set on fire, they were like, are you saying people need to come to our alumni building and burn our college down? And I was like, no, like this is called sarcasm.
Excuse me, have you heard of the dumpster fire phrase?
Yes, exactly. And of course, they eventually get to the tweets that are like most, quote, like flagrantly homosexual, where I'm like, happy pride, if you're in the closet, I love you. And where I met Becky Albertalli and I said that I was writing a book about two girls in love. And I'm like sitting there like absolutely petrified. And he's like, are you a homosexual? I said this to this like 48-year-old man who runs a Christian college. I said, I'm asexual like the Apostle Paul. Because I am not sexually attracted to men. Like I didn't say because I am not sexually attracted to men, but in my head I'm like, well, I'm bisexual and queer. But I was thinking in my head, I am bisexual, but I am asexual to men. So I said out loud that I was asexual like the Apostle Paul because I could not comprehend being a lesbian. Like, I still had to marry a man. Like, there was no option in my mind. I still had to marry a man because if I didn't marry a man, I was going to be disowned by my family. So I was like, I'm bisexual, but I am asexual with men. So, I wouldn't say I was a lesbian for like 18 more months. It was a time. But so at the end of this meeting, I ended up getting fined a $100 fine. I was removed from my position as a student leader in our campus TV department, was fired from my community service rep position in our society. I had to go to required counseling and I was put on disciplinary probation. And then they were like, we're watching you. So, and Big Brother has nothing on the Bob Jones apparatus of watching you. Like, I don't even know how they do it, but in a meeting about 5 days later, I got called into another meeting, and they said, we noticed your Twitter went private at 3:57 this date.
Jesus Christ.
Like, they knew everything.
Yo, that's so fucked up.
They were, like, going through my Goodreads reviews and flagging any book that I read that I, like, mentioned in a review was queer. They were, like, deep diving into my internet history. It was, like, OG cancel culture. So I kind of I went through the required counseling. I denied being a homosexual to the best of my ability. So normally when you get at a school like Bob Jones, when you get in trouble, you have to sign a thing saying like, I acknowledge I was wrong. And it like lists the behavior that you did that broke the rules. Well, they didn't have a rule that I'd broken. So I signed a paper saying I violated the spirit of the student handbook.
Oh my God.
And of course, at like any other institution, Title IX would have protected me. Like I should have been protected. Like nobody should be forcibly trying to out me and forcing me to name my sexuality and go through required counseling to like get me to be heterosexual. But Title IX doesn't cover an institution like Bob Jones because they have a religious exemption. So after I graduated, over a year later, I was approached by a friend who knew I'd gone to Bob Jones, and he knew about the lawsuit because his now ex is a part of the lawsuit. He texted me and he said, "Do you know of a student at a school like Bob Jones who would be interested in suing the Department of Education for their rights being violated?" And I was like, "Are you talking about me? Like, is this what you're talking about?" I found out the lawsuit is specifically, we are not suing Bob Jones. We're not suing like the colleges. We're suing the Department of Ed for allowing these religious exemptions that violate our civil rights as students. And when the lawsuit went public, it went viral. Like, they know that, like, if they had sex on campus or, like, drank on campus, they could get kicked out. It's another thing to be kicked out just because you think, I might not be straight. And that was all I was doing as a student, was thinking I might not be straight. That thought policing of that aspect of your life is so dangerous and harmful, and no college should have, like, that unlimited ability to harm students in that way.
So does the case like affect your life in any meaningful way on the day-to-day?
Not that much. It's really interesting. It hasn't affected my job, mostly because my work has asked me to keep it very distinctly off the record where I work. And I do work in the same town as my old college, which has led to some like awkward issues. My state attorney general has filed an amicus brief against me. So that's another like really weird connection, like something that the powers in your state are opposed to your case. Mm-hmm. But as a journalist, because it's my name on the case and because I'm reporting on my local news, I can't talk about it. Like, I can't, because there's a huge conflict of interest there. So, and also we're lucky in that these kind of court cases are so specific in legal language, etc., that most of our viewers don't care. We don't really talk about lawsuits on air. Thankfully, we have a great legal team and I don't have to worry about the day-to-day interactions of the case and like all the paperwork and etc.
Yeah, as someone who has to do all the paperwork in a day-to-day regarding legal stuff, this is a better place to be.
It's nice to be a plaintiff and not have to worry about how you're gonna win.
It's probably nice to be a plaintiff when it's like something like this. It's probably not great when it's like a fucking like custody case or something.
Oh my god, yeah.
To end on a lighter note, on our extremely light meme podcast where we never discuss deeper things than memes, is there a particular TikTok trend right now that you're super into?
I honestly am not a great TikToker. Like, I don't pay attention to trends until like 2 weeks after they've been trending, and then I'm like, oh, that's cool. I mean, everybody's into bones.
Oh, yes.
I had to explain to my coworkers what a no bones and a bones day was, so that's probably the only trend I'm super aware of.
Do you think that when this podcast releases, if this is still like relevant, do you think it is a bones day or a no bones day?
It's November 10th of Bones Day. Well, it's not an election week, so it has that going for it. I'm trying to like figure out like when daylight savings ends.
I like how seriously we're taking this question.
Yeah, like you guys are like thinking about this.
Daylight savings ends on November 7th. So we do get the extra hour of sleep. Will that bring us forward until the 10th?
I'm hopeful. I need that to be a Bones week because I'm taking the LSAT 2 days later. So I'm going to say it's a Bones day. I need noodles to come through for me.
So, congratulations, everybody. It's a Bones Day.
And, you know, if Noodles says it's a no bones day, my dog says every day is a bones day.
Last thing, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I have the same username everywhere, so this is super easy. It's just that Liz Hunter, ThatLiz Hunter. And it confuses everyone because I go by Elizabeth, but my social media name is Liz. So you can call me Liz or Elizabeth.
All right, so this podcast is going to go viral because it's a Bones Day, and then Elizabeth is going to get 5 million more followers. And on that note, if you like this episode, tell a friend. Word of mouth is how we grow. And maybe perhaps leave a review on iTunes. Thank you to everyone who left a review so far, and thank you to all of our Patreon patrons. Shout out specifically to Zoe Stoller, like extra specifically today, but also to Bray, Andre Grunt. I don't know why I said your name like that, get over it. Ultra Lord from Jimmy Neutron specifically. I'm sorry, Brian, I forgot what you wanted me to say for that. Another shout out to Sam Rizer, who made our podcast music, and you can find us online at wowtrue.com or on Twitter as @wowtruepod and Instagram and Facebook as @wowtrue. If you want to throw us a couple of dollars, slide right into our Patreon at patreon.com/wowtrue. And if you've had your 15 seconds of fame, you are TikTok famous, you have opinions on avocado pits, or know someone who has opinions, slide right into our Twitter DMs. And until next time, let's get famous on the internet.